Greetings, Gallivanters. One of the most famous hotels of Florida's Gulf Coast sits on a beach in St. Petersburg. With its top-to-bottom pink paint job and turrets and towers that tout a castle-like aesthetic, it's earned itself the nickname, the Pink Palace. Florida sure loves its castles, huh? This Florida landmark's history goes back over a century and anchors itself on a tragic love story that extends into the afterlife. I'm Ivan Lopez, and this is Gallivant of the Grotesque. I explore some weird and macabre subjects from the world's history, science, and lore. Let's check in and go gallivanting through the Don CeSar Hotel. Thomas Roe was a London real estate heir in the 1890s who loved the opera. And one night, at a production of Meridana, he met Spanish singer Lucinda de Guzman at a fountain in a nearby pink hotel. And it was at that fountain where the two quickly fell in love. Now, after that brief night, Thomas and Lucinda had to part ways, but not without the promise that they would one day meet again at the fountain at the Pink Castle. For several years, Roe sent letter after letter to Lucinda, only to receive them back unopened. This was obviously heartbreaking for him, and what he didn't know was that Lucinda's parents didn't approve of their relationship and forbade Lucinda from ever seeing him again. But the day did come that he would receive a letter that wasn't one that he himself sent. Excellent, finally. And that letter came with the news of Lucinda's untimely death. And the question of why he never wrote. This just keeps getting better and better, huh? Heartbroken, Roe packed up and moved to America, eventually landing in St. Petersburg, Florida, where he began the grand gesture that would last over a century. He bought 80 acres of land and built a pink hotel with large Roman arches and a fountain that was identical to the one where he and Lucinda fell in love. In 1928, the Don CeSar opened, named after the protagonist of the show that was responsible for their lives connecting. And the hotel was massively successful. But, as this story goes, all good things must come to an end, and Roe died of a heart attack in 1940, appropriately in the lobby of the Pink Palace, although those who love a good romance story would argue that it was from his broken heart, which I'm sure was his wife's favorite theory. Wait, what? Oh, did I not mention he got married? No? Can you imagine roaming your spouse's castle, knowing why they built it, and also knowing that you're not getting a castle yourself? Shortly after Roe's passing, the Don CeSar closed and was then later bought by the US military, who converted it into a hospital for World War II soldiers. And as you can probably guess, not every soldier made it out of that building alive. It took on other lives before reopening as a hotel in 1973, and then was added to the National Registry of Historic Places. And when does this get weird? Yeah, so what would Thomas Roe think of his beloved Don CeSar in its current state? Well, apparently you can ask him yourself, if you can spot him. But when he's not sighted roaming the 5th floor where he resided in life, he has been reported roaming the grounds of the hotel, greeting guests from afar, only to vanish when approached. And if you're an employee there, you may have noticed Roe opening doors for you and your colleagues, making sure that the place runs smoothly, even from the afterlife. And that, Gallivanters, that's passion. Think maybe I can keep creating after my time is up? And doesn't that sound like a pleasant haunting? I mean, if hauntings are your thing. Personally, seeing Mr. Roe roaming the grounds on my vacation would probably add to it. Remember what I mentioned before, what the hotel was during the Second World War, the military hospital? Some say they have felt cold spots and the feelings of multiple presences around the hotel, and last I checked, Thomas Roe was only one person. Now, word is, these presences are the spirits of the soldiers that never left, and they continue to walk the premises for decades. Now, what we don't know is whether or not they're as nice as Thomas Roe. All I'm saying is, Roe is the only one holding doors for people. So we know what Thomas Roe has been up to over these past years, but whatever became of his beloved Lucinda? Did they ever meet each other again in the great beyond? Some say yes, as many have reported a woman in a Spanish dress hanging out by the fountain. And there is one account by a former regular. A newlywed couple had their honeymoon at the Don CeSar shortly after its reopening, and they loved it so much that they decided to make it a tradition to come to the hotel on their anniversary. Eventually, the man's wife passed, but the tradition did not die with her, and he continued the annual visits in her honor. On his first solo visit, he took a walk on the beach, and he saw a couple doing the same. This was as sweet as it was nostalgic, except for one detail. The couple didn't seem to be walking. They were gliding over the waves, lacking feet under the Spanish dress and the slacks beside it. Now, thinking no one would believe this, the man turned to try to find somebody to share the sight with. He didn't find anybody. And then when he turned back around, the couple had vanished, leaving him entirely alone. And for years, he would go on to tell this story, hoping that one day he and his wife would find each other in the afterlife. Now, there is beauty and tragedy in the best love stories. The tale of the Don CeSar Hotel is no exception. So if you find yourself vacationing on the Gulf Coast of the Sunshine State, swing by the Pink Palace and try to chat with the man in the white suit and the Panama hat.